North Carolina is one of the best states to buy right now, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. In this video, I'm walking through 10 types of homes across North Carolina that look normal on the surface, but I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Let's start right away. The first type is those 90s homes with a basement garage. And I'm giving this warning to more buyers than honestly I can count. And I mean it every single time. This is my #1 issue in our market currently. In the 1990s, there was a huge wave of home construction across North Carolina, especially here in the Piedmont Triad, where we have a little more lots with some undulation and fall off or grade, if you will. See, builders were putting up 2-story box homes with good construction in beautiful neighborhoods, gorgeous tree-lined streets, and a lot of them tucked the garage in the basement level. Yeah, those neighborhoods are gorgeous and the homes are well built. But younger buyers today don't want a basement garage. I'm just saying it like it is. And this is not the old man here telling you to get off my lawn. I work with younger buyers all the time, and I see that more often than you would imagine. See, they're way more particular than my generation about parking underground or in the basement and carrying groceries or kids up a full flight of stairs. For some, that's a deal breaker for a big chunk of today's buyers. And this shows up at the resale market. Every time you go to sell, you're competing for a smaller audience. The smaller the audience means longer days on market and lower prices, because oftentimes it means less buyers. See, in some of Winston-Salem's best neighborhoods, this is the exact situation you'll find. And while we're talking about things that chip away at your buyer pool for resale, there's a noise and a traffic issue that's been getting worse every year, and I'll get to that later on. However, why don't we go over the fix for these 90s homes first? Okay, so the way to fix this is a circle driveway that brings people straight to the front door at the main level. It changes the whole feel of the home, and it opens your buyer pool back up without any real structural changes at the house. And for some of these neighborhoods, that means that you might have a slightly uphill circle drive, but it really can open up your buyer pool. If you're looking at 90s homes in the Piedmont Triad and falling in love with everything else, check the garage location before you get emotionally attached. Price the circle driveway conversation into your decision before you make an offer. That one check is worth the entire video, perhaps. And that idea, checking the things that maybe aren't obvious before you fall in love, is what I'll cover next, because the risk coming up is one that North Carolina just lived through in a big way. See, flood risk is simple, right? You check the map. If you're not in a flood zone, you're fine. You move on. Well, Hurricane Helene ended that thinking. See, that's what happened to thousands of homeowners across North Carolina, specifically Western North Carolina. And what made it so hard beyond the storm itself is this. Most of these people had done everything right. They checked the official maps, they were told their property wasn't in a flood zone, and they didn't buy flood insurance because the paperwork specifically said they didn't need to. The official FEMA flood maps for Western North Carolina counties, including Buncombe and Yancey, Avery, and Burke, were last updated somewhere between 2007 and 2010. In Buncombe County alone, FEMA's map flagged 2,100 properties as flood risks. Independent climate modeling by First Street put that real number of at-risk properties closer to 19,500. That's a gap of nearly 10 times. And when Helene hit, fewer than 1% of people in the affected counties had flood insurance. That is a brutal situation to be in. Let me share 2 tools every North Carolina buyer should use before making an offer, especially on anything near a river or a creek, or frankly, anywhere in Western North Carolina mountain terrain. First, the North Carolina Flood Risk Information System. Type in any address on the site and you'll get flood insurance data, flood zone ratings, and risk assessments. Second, First Street's Climate Risk Tool, which Zillow now shows on every single listing, gives you a forward-looking view of actual risk at the specific address. Use both. And if they tell different things, take the higher risk read seriously. A map that's over 15 years old shouldn't be the last word on a six-figure decision. Now, flood risk hits from outside the home, but the next one lives right underneath it. But before that, if you'd like some help sorting through any of this before you make a decision in North Carolina, that's exactly what I do. I can help you spot these risks before they become your problem. My contact information is in the description below. Let's keep going. You're on your back porch on a random morning, coffee in hand, and in the distance, you can hear a steady drone of traffic that never fully goes away. Not loud enough to be a problem, but certainly loud enough to possibly be annoying. And it never stops. See, that's daily life for buyers who didn't think to check the roads before they made an offer. North Carolina is a quiet state. That's a big part of why people move here, frankly. And if you're coming from Atlanta or New York or DC, you feel the difference, frankly, within days, weeks at most. The baseline here is peaceful, suburban, and rural character, even pretty close to city centers. And that's exactly why traffic and noise hits harder here than they would in a major metro. A home that backs up to a double yellow road carries a burden that shows up every single day. The background hum, the headlights at night, the road noise that frankly never fades. It feels more disruptive here because everything else around it is so quiet, and that always shows up at resale. On top of that, the I-85, I-40 stretches have brought way more truck traffic into the neighborhoods that were quiet 10 years ago. E-commerce warehousing has expanded along those routes, and the truck volume followed. See, homes next to these roads are dealing with a noise problem that's going to probably keep growing. I want to hold on to this idea of roads for a minute because later I'm going to cover a risk that takes the traffic problem to a different level, but that's coming up. So these homes aren't unsellable, but they need to be priced for the trade-off, and buyers need to understand it going in. Before you make an offer, spend time at the property at different times of day, early morning and early evening, when traffic might be at its highest, and that will tell you everything you need to know. The traffic issue is something you can check with a few extra visits. The next one is invisible from the street entirely, and it lives under the floorboards. This one doesn't even show up as a risk for most buyers coming from up north, and that's exactly why it catches them so hard. I'm talking about homes with crawl space issues. So if you grew up in the Northeast or Midwest, most of the homes you've lived in were built on slabs or, frankly, full basements. Crawl spaces are a southern thing, and North Carolina's climate, warm summers with high humidity, mild winters, well, it creates a moisture problem that is tough on anything wood or organic underneath a home. And it never fully dries out down there. What starts as moisture becomes the M word I don't want to use. And then it becomes wood rot. And what starts as wood rot eventually could become a structural problem and a very expensive fix. Termites and carpenter ants follow the same path. Moisture does attract them. Out-of-state homebuyers don't know to ask for a crawl space inspection because they've never owned a home with one. And that's exactly where the problem can hide. Crawl space issues are very common, and a standard home inspection might miss them if the inspector isn't specifically focused on it. A full fix can run from $1,000 to multiple thousands of dollars on the low end to, frankly, tens of thousands of encapsulation and structural repairs and the M word that we're not going to talk about. That's why we always focus very intently on the crawl space inspection. Encapsulation, sealing crawl space with a vapor barrier can often be paired with a dehumidifier, and it can be the go-to fix, but there's multiple fixes. It could be as simple as putting a dehumidifier down there, but is plumbing and electrical easily and readily there? Does it even have a vapor barrier? There are so many varieties, and the fix can be as easy as $800 and as much as $15. It does depend on how far you want to go. Side note, if you wanted to fully encapsulate your crawl space, it is very expensive, plus it brings up radon, which is something we'll cover in another video, but is not uncommon in our climate. From what hides below the floor, let's go above it, because the roof is where North Carolina's insurance situation is getting expensive. Walk into a flipped home in North Carolina right now and it looks like a magazine. Fresh paint, new countertops, new flooring, and updated light fixtures throughout. The whole house feels like it was just built yesterday. Then you ask about the roof. See, that pattern shows up all the time in homes that have been fixed up like this. Everything you can see has been updated, and everything you can't see without asking has been left in its place. A lot of times, that's an older roof or an original HVAC sitting under all that brand new paint. By the time a buyer finds this out, they're often weeks into a contract and sometimes several $1,000s of due diligence and inspection monies into the home. North Carolina home insurance base rates went up around 7.5% in June of 2025. With another increase locked in this year, insurers are tightening up. And the roof is the single biggest factor. North Carolina carriers won't write policies on roofs older than about 20 years. Some cut it off even earlier. Past that point, coverage gets limited, expensive, or tied to an independent roof inspection before the policy can even be written. Or in many cases, after you buy the home, they come back 30 days later and pull your policy. Ask the seller directly what work was done, by whom, and when. Get documentation, not just a verbal answer, and pull permits. See, roofs in North Carolina typically do need permits, and permit records shows when the real installation date is. Get an independent roof inspection during due diligence, and if the roof is approaching or past the 15-year mark, factor in replacement costs before you close, possibly in the due diligence request. See, roofs are a good reminder that what you can see doesn't always tell the full story, but I got a perfect example of that in a different direction. You see basements in the listing and you start planning the home gym or the guest suite or maybe a home theater. You've got the whole thing designed before you've even made the appointment. Then you walk down the stairs and you feel like you entered the set of a horror movie. See, certain older homes in North Carolina, especially in the Piedmont and parts of the foothills, have full basements, but not the kind you might be imagining. These are raw, dark, low-ceiling spaces cut into the red clay that defines the North Carolina Piedmont soil. Red clay in this region behaves differently from almost any other soil type in the country. It swells when it's wet and shrinks when it's dry, which means moisture management in these spaces is going to be an ongoing challenge. The ceiling height, the moisture, the structural of the space, none of it supports it. See, what starts as curiosity, oh, this has a basement, turns to unease pretty fast once the lights come on. See, the shift happens quickly during a showing and it can pull a buyer out mentally in a way that's hard or impossible to recover from. My tip is this. If you're selling a home with one of these spaces, price it right and be upfront. Buyers who know what they're walking into before the showing are in a much better spot to think about it clearly. And if you're buying, go in knowing what it is and leave your expectations at the basement level, literally. The location might still make perfect sense. Just make sure the basement isn't the reason you made the call in the first place. From below grade surprise, let's go to something on the roof that catches people off guard after they're already under contract. Solar panels on the roof means lower electric bills, clean energy. It sounds like a win. And on the listing, it looks like a feature. Here's the deal. In North Carolina right now, it's more complicated than that. From a pure investment standpoint, the case for solar in this state is much weaker than in other states, where it's taken off because North Carolina has no state solar tax credit. The federal homeowner credit was eliminated at the end of 2025 under the budget reconciliation bill, and until the grid economics shift here, you won't get the same return, frankly, as other states. But owned solar is a separate thing from leased solar. And leased solar on a home you're buying is where the real problem lives. When a home has an existing solar lease that transfers to you as a buyer, a few things happen right at once. The lease payments go up each year through the escalating clause built into the contract, looking at rising costs for 20 to 25 years. That monthly lease payment counts against your debt-to-income ratio when you're qualifying for a mortgage, which can affect how much you can borrow. You also have to qualify with the solar company separately, which adds an approval step that can show up down the road or, frankly, right before closing. And there's another NC-specific issue. While the North Carolina Supreme Court has said homeowners have the right to install rooftop solar, HOAs can still control where the panels go and can require removal from certain spots. So a buyer inheriting a solar lease might also be inheriting a fight with the HOA over where the panels are. Before you move forward with any homes with solar panels, get clear answers on 4 things. Is the system owned outright, financed or leased? If it's leased or financed, what's the monthly payment and how much does it go up to each year and how much time is left on the contract? What's the buyout to end it early? And is the original solar company still in business? See, some smaller installers have shut down, which creates messy situations around maintenance and contract handoffs. That's your homework before even attending the showing. Now, since we just touched on HOAs, let's go there next, because HOA issues are one of the more unpredictable surprises a buyer can walk into after closing. You found the perfect home in a beautiful neighborhood with great amenities. The literal white picket fence life you were looking for. Then the first letter arrives. HOA issues only show up months after you move in. A lot of North Carolina residents live under HOA rules. And look, for most buyers, the HOA isn't a bad thing. It guarantees well-maintained common areas, neighborhood standards, and a sense of community. The issue is what the CCRs actually say and how the board decides to enforce them. See, believe it or not, North Carolina is more owner-friendly than most states, and HOA matters. Legislatures passed House Bill 444 last year, a reform package effective July 1st, 2025 that caps fines at $2,500 per violation. It also stops HOAs from foreclosing over unpaid fines without going through the courts, requires mediation before suing homeowners, and limits budgets increasing over 10% without homeowner approval. These are fantastic protections, but they're protections on paper. Enforcement still depends on homeowners knowing their rights and being willing to use them. And the HOAs certainly won't tell you that. On top of that, the CCRs still control what you can do with your own property. Renovations, parking, exterior changes, and yes, where your solar panels can go. Remember that? So, my take, read the full CCRs before closing, the full document. Ask specifically about recent enforcement actions, pending assessments, and any current disputes. Oh, and special assessments can show up without much warning and carry a real price tag. A well-run HOA is a great thing, but a poorly run one is a recurring source of stress and costs you just don't see coming, and you won't know which one you're dealing with until you've done your homework. From restrictions you don't find out until after you move in, let's go to one that's sitting in a publicly available government database right now. The neighborhood looks quiet, and the road out front is calm, and the yard backs up to what looks like an open land, peaceful 2-lane country road. You make an offer without thinking twice. What nobody told you is that the road is already on the state's expansion schedule, and it's about to get real noisy up here. See, North Carolina DOT maintains a 10-year state transportation improvement program that's publicly available and searchable. The 2026 to 2035 STIP was finalized and received federal approval in December of 2025, and it identifies every major widening, interchange improvement, and capacity project planned across the state. That's years of potential construction noise, traffic disruption, and in some cases, eminent domain, often right next to properties that look perfectly quiet today. Buyers almost never check this before making an offer. They drive up, they see no orange cones, and they figure what they see is what they'll live with. Then the signs start to show up and finally understand why the neighbors are leaving. Here in the Triad, we know this firsthand. The Winston-Salem Northern Beltway has been under construction for years, and whole stretches that seemed settled had to adjust to this reality. NCDOT has publicly searchable project databases and interactive STIP maps. Type in any address near a state highway or a major road before you make an offer. It'll tell you whether any planned road work will affect that property in the next 5 to 10 years. Takes 5 minutes and it's free. If the map shows construction might be coming, that's not necessarily a deal breaker on its own, but you should know it before you sign. It'll give you time to mentally prepare. Okay, so we've covered risks that come from outside the property, but this last one is different. It lives underground and it's off the municipal grid. And for buyers coming from anywhere urban, it's a concept they've probably never had to deal with before. You fall in love with the property, the land, the quiet, and the space. A house that feels nothing like suburban life. You're picturing mornings on the porch, room for the dogs to run. It feels like exactly what you were looking for. Then you find out that the septic system hasn't been inspected in years. Roughly half of North Carolina homes rely on septic systems. A good share of rural properties also pull water from private wells. And if you lived in cities or dense suburbs your whole life, like I had, this may be the first home you've ever owned that's fully off municipal systems. And the difference is bigger than most first-time rural buyers expect. A failing septic system isn't something that just happens on old farms. A real share of North Carolina's septic systems have some kind of failure in a given year. A full replacement can run anywhere from $5,000 on the low end to the teens or even a touch higher for trickier sites before you add the drain field work. And the yard can look fine, the toilets can flush normally, but the problem lives underground and often gets found only when an inspector specifically looks for it. Private wells come with their own concerns around water quality, pressure, and quantity. As of mid-2024, North Carolina updated its disclosure rules to require sellers to say whether a private well has ever been tested. That's a starting point, but there's still ground to cover. Always, without exception, require a dedicated well water test and a septic inspection once you're under contract. These are standard in North Carolina deals, and any seller or agent who pushes back on them, that could be slightly a red flag. The land might be exactly right, the location might be the perfect fit, but just don't let the pull of the property get ahead of your due diligence on what's underneath it. The homes on this list are active listings right now, and most buyers walk past the warning signs before anybody tells them what to look for. But now you know. So if you're researching a specific property in North Carolina and you want a second set of eyes, maybe to help you do your own due diligence before you go under contract, email me at sales@theginthergroup.com today. If you're still figuring out whether Winston-Salem is the right city for your situation, I've linked a video that covers the real pros and cons, an honest breakdown, including the things that might not work for you. Catch that one next. All right, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you on the next one.